You're going to get tired of me at this rate because this is like the third video today, and thank you to my cameraman for allowing that to happen, just because I came up against a situation. And as I said earlier, I'm like, hey, come here and look at this because here's a chance to see what I'm talking about. I've had several requests about how do we determine the pleat widths at the waist and the hip. So I thought here's a great opportunity to show. In this case, we're pleating to the stripe because I mentioned with the other video that the customers decided that we're pleating to the green stripe, the wide green stripe on the blue. So great, so on we go. I've got his measurements. I've started out, where did I put the measurements? I wrote them down somewhere. Waist 36, hip 40. The fella and the length don't matter too much in this case. I don't apply it all in this case. So I just sort of arbitrarily at that 36, I just pulled numbers out of my head. I just went 20-inch apron, 16-inch pleat to add to 36, because I tend to do a fairly narrow A-line in my aprons. It's just my personal style. So 20, 21, so 16 inches of pleats at the waist, 19 inches at the hip. That's just what I've started with, and I only got those numbers because I'm used to making army kilts where the the apron tends to be a much greater proportion than the pleated portion, and again, never less than the points of the pelvis. So initially I'll generally start at 50-50, right? So 18 and 18, 20 and 20, but I just those numbers looked right to me instinctively, so I just went there. Now let's see if they will survive reality. So what I'm going to do is the chalking isn't very strong, but I've chalked out the front apron centered on that line. I went to the other end and I chalked out the inner apron. I gave a generous allowance. This little X here is my first pleat, and there's the edge of the apron. So that's a fairly fair. That's about as deep as I want to do an apron pleat. It's approaching 50%. There's the center of the pleat, but this cloth is slightly lighter than what I'm used to working with. So I want that extra cloth hanging in the front for modesty's sake, and also to improve the hang, so that when he's wearing an apron, it doesn't wrinkle too easily, because that looks terrible. So I've done that at each end, and then I've counted the number of repeats, and I got 27. Now, because we're pleating to the line, to the stripe, I know that that's how many pleats I can actually have in the finished kilt. When we pleat to the set, and I'll show that separately, another factor comes into play, but we'll worry about that then. So here we are, 27 pleats. Now, so I'm just going to write down 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, 7/8, 1 inch. So half, of course, is 13, half of 27, 13.5 inches. 1 inch, of course, 27 inches. Now, neither of those work, because remember, 16 and 19 are what we're shooting for. So I do, to determine the rest of it, and if you got any sort of mathematical skills at all, and I mean, you don't have to be very good at math or even arithmetic to be better than me. So I use the method that was determined, I believe it was determined by pre-literate tailor apprentices sometime over the last 200 years, in which they count out the increments on their tape measure. And the way we do this, here's 13.5. Now, my next measurement I want to find is 5/8. So I'm going to add 27/8. And go 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Then I get all the way up to, I'll actually just do it in front of you. So there's 13.5. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 27. So that comes to 16 and 7/8. Well, it's close to 16, isn't it? Okay, well, there's a start. But we're going to keep going. 3/4. I go back to 13.5, and now I'm counting quarters, right? So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6. I've lost. That's ridiculous. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 20, 22, 24, 26, 27. So that's 20 and 1/8. And 7/8 from there, I can just add 8 in. It's from 20 and then 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 27. So there we've got 23 and 5/8. Now, other people will tell you to start dividing into 16ths and 32nds and 64ths, and I'm not going to go that way. So what I do is I look at my predicted line and I see what comes close to matching. Well, the closest I've got to 16 is 16 and 7/8. 7/8 is almost an inch. So let's call that 17 and go with 5/8. So this is now going to be 19. And 3/4, well, we were looking at 19. Let's just bump it up. 20 and 1/8. And we can deal with that discrepancy of 1/8 of an inch in each case just by using the determining what side of the chalk mark we use. And I think I've covered that elsewhere, and if not, I'll go back and look and cover it again. So now, there we go. I've just altered, these were the 19, the 16 and the 19 were my projected theoretical ideal, but it's easier for me, rather than counting in 32nds and 64ths and 16ths and the rest of it, I just bump the numbers accordingly. So now it's going to be 16 and 7/8, or 7 inches at the waist, and it's going to be 20 and 1/8 at the hip. So I've just adjusted the size of my apron to suit, and now I'm ready to start sewing. It's fun to practice, really. It's kind of relaxing to practice. I mean, I'm not quite as mathematically dunce as I make myself out to be, but I'm pretty damn close. But I do find this method of counting out with my thumbs, it's kind of contemplative and relaxing and quiet, and frankly, it's much harder to make an error with this than to drop a decimal place using actually my brain. So there we are. So we've I hope that is clear to you, and please don't be afraid to ask questions, comments, and concerns, because that's how everybody learns. But also try to sort of figure it out yourself as well, because the conclusion that you reach yourself, you are going to remember and frankly buy into much more than something that I'm just rabbiting on at you. So thank you again. It may be a while before I put up another video, so have fun, stay safe, wash your hands, and be nice to each other.